Hey everyone, let's jump right into our masterclass on emergency department facility coding. Today, we're breaking down the absolute house rules of medical billing, and we're doing it in plain English. If you've ever been confused about how hospitals actually get paid for ER visits, well, you're in the right place. We're going to strip away all that confusing jargon and look exactly at how this system is built from the ground up in this explainer. Here is our roadmap for Part 1. We're going to define what actually makes an ED, split them into Type A and Type B, separate the hospital bill from the doctor's bill, unpack Medicare's overarching rules, and finally, solve a real-world billing mystery.
All right, Section 1. What is an ED? Let's start with the absolute basics.
Before we can bill for an emergency department visit, we have to define the physical space itself. According to the rules, an ED is specifically built to handle unexpected acute care. The biggest defining factor? Patients show up without a prior appointment. They arrive either by walking through the front doors or rolling through the back doors in an ambulance. If a patient scheduled their visit for next Tuesday, they are not in an ED.
Now, you might hear this space called the ER, the A&E, the emergency ward, or the casualty department. But here is your main takeaway. Regardless of what the sign outside the building says, the core facility billing rules remain exactly the same.
Moving right along to Section 2, Type A versus Type B emergency departments.
So this basic definition builds into our first major categorization rule stemming from a massive split CMS created back in 2007. They realized not all emergency rooms are created equal, so they divided them into two entirely distinct buckets. Knowing which bucket your specific hospital falls into will entirely dictate the code sets you're allowed to use.
The difference really just comes down to hours and codes. Type A facilities are your traditional, massive emergency rooms. They're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, licensed by the state, and they use standard CPT codes like 99281 through 99285. But what if a facility isn't open all night? Well, that makes it a Type B ED. To qualify, at least one-third of their outpatient visits have to be for urgent, unscheduled care. Because they lack that massive 24/7 overhead, Type B facilities use a completely different set of G codes to bill for their visits.
All right, Section 3, professional versus facility coding. This brings us to the biggest foundational concept of this entire series. If you only remember one thing from today's explainer, make it this. You have to separate the building from the brain. Think of an ED visit like a stay at a highly specialized hotel. Facility coding is the hotel. When a facility bills a code, they're charging for the physical room, the electricity, the specialized supplies, IV bags, and all the hard work done by the nursing staff. Professional coding, on the other hand, represents the doctor. The physician bills entirely separately for their cognitive effort. They get paid for their medical decision-making, physical exams, direct procedures, and interpreting things like EKGs.
So here is your coder's takeaway, and it's a big one. Because the doctor and the hospital are billing for entirely different things, there is no definitive strong correlation between the two. The physician's code level does not have to match the facility's code level for the exact same patient encounter. Think about it. A patient might sit in a room for hours using a ton of nursing resources, driving up the facility level, while the doctor only pops in for 5 minutes to make a quick, straightforward decision, resulting in a low professional level. There's just no rational basis to force one code to match the other.
That leads us right into Section 4, CMS Guiding Principles.
Since we know the facility bills for room and resource usage, we need to know who hands down the master rulebook for how to actually count and score those resources. Surprisingly, the answer is no one. CMS completely refuses to give us a single, standardized national cheat sheet for facility coding. It is essentially the Wild West. Instead, CMS forces every single hospital to establish and write its own specific facility billing guidelines.
But it isn't total chaos. CMS does strictly require these custom rules to meet a few specific expectations. The biggest one? The rules must actually reflect hospital resources, not physician effort. A Level 5 visit has to visibly consume more nursing effort and supplies than a Level 1. Furthermore, the guidelines have to be crystal clear for audits, fully HIPAA compliant, and most importantly, they must only require documentation that is clinically necessary. You absolutely cannot force nurses to write extra, useless fluff in the chart just to justify a higher bill.
Okay, Section 5, the triage-only rule. Let's apply everything we just learned to a high-stakes, real-world edge case that trips up new billers all the time. Imagine this scenario.
A patient walks into the ER feeling sick. They go to the front desk, a triage nurse takes their blood pressure, checks their temperature, asks a few questions. The patient then sits in the waiting room, gets tired of waiting, and walks out the front door before a doctor ever actually evaluates them. Because the patient used our space and our nursing staff, do we still get to send Medicare a bill for the lowest level facility visit?
According to strict CMS guidelines, the answer to that question is an absolute, undeniable no. We cannot bill for that visit.
Let's look at exactly why CMS says no. Medicare dictates that hospital outpatient therapeutic services and supplies must be furnished incident to a physician's service and under the direct order of a physician. Because the patient left before seeing the doctor, there was no physician service for the facility resources to be incident to. Even if your hospital has a standing order that allows nurses to automatically perform a triage assessment on anyone who walks in, CMS explicitly states that therapeutic services provided by a nurse in response to a standing order do not satisfy this requirement. Bottom line, no doctor interaction means no bill goes out.
That wraps up our baseline house rules. We now know what an ED is, the difference between type A and B, why the hotel bill is separate from the doctor bill, and the baseline CMS expectations.
But this leaves us with a massive cliffhanger. If CMS refuses to provide a national standard, how do thousands of independent hospitals keep their facility billing fair, consistent, and audit-proof? We're going to answer that exact question in Part 2 of this masterclass when we introduce the industry-standard ACP guidelines and show you exactly how to score a visit using the 3-column leveling matrix. You definitely won't want to miss it.